Extraordinary Life Stories is proudly sponsored by the Georgia Emerson Centre.
Hello, my name is John Reynolds. On this episode of Extraordinary Life Stories, I'm talking with John Caudwell. John is an entrepreneur, business leader and philanthropist. He's a self-made billionaire, having founded the Caudwell Group, a telecommunications company which included Phones for You, which was the UK's largest independent mobile phone retailer at the time. As a signatory to the Giving Pledge, John is committed to giving at least 70% of his wealth to charitable causes during and after his lifetime. John is clear that he wants to be remembered for his charity work rather than his business success. I'd like to know how John defines success. This episode was extra special for me as John kindly invited me to talk with him in his most incredible house in Mayfair in London. John, thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
Tell me, who is John Caudwell?
I wish I knew. How do I answer that question? Well, I'm multifaceted, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And those multifacets have changed over the years. But I think now I describe myself in principle as an entrepreneur and philanthropist. But there's more to me than that because I find myself desperately wanting the very best for the world, but especially the best for Britain. So I'm all about driving Britain for me to be extremely proud of Britain and for the great to be in our title properly, Great Britain. And part of that is a humanitarian quest, that I just want everybody to have the best life that they can be within practical limitations. And so that's sort of the main driver overall in my life.
That's awesome. What a drive to have. I want to take you back, and then we'll come back to that. What did you want to be when you were growing up? What was your kind of inspirations and decisions for career?
Well, as most kids, a fireman, policeman, maths teacher, all sorts of things. But the more generic dream that I had, and it was a dream, was, and I don't know exactly how old I was, but I know it was around 7 years old. Okay. And I had the dream to be successful and charitable. But I didn't see it like that as a 7-year-old in the back streets of Stoke-on-Trent. My vision was to be in the back of a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce, because a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce was the epitome of the best car in the world, according to my father, and giving £5 notes out from the rear seat to poor people in the streets. And that was my somewhat precocious but naive vision of the future. And of course, fortunately, I went on to achieve both of those things, although in a slightly different way.
Yeah. So from that vision and that motivation to then the career choices and decisions you made, talk me through that and what ultimately led to what you did in business.
I'd got no inspiration on the back streets of Stoke-on-Trent. There's nobody there to inspire me. There was nobody there to help me. And so that vision sat with me. And I always think of it as a bit of a Damocles sword. It's something sitting on top of me that I've got to find a way of resolving. The wealth first, because without the wealth, you couldn't do the charitable piece. And how do you do it? And I did some ridiculous things, I bought embassy coupons from poor people who smoke lots of cigarettes, although that's a sort of a dichotomy of words, isn't it? If they're poor people, why are they smoking all those cigarettes? But anyway, they were. And I bought the embassy coupons, which are the coupons in a cigarette packet, traded them in for for the gifts that you could get from them, and then sold the gifts in the newsagent's window. Ridiculous, I mean, just ridiculous.
Entrepreneurial, though.
Entrepreneurial. I was only 13 or 14 at the time. Entrepreneurial, but ridiculous. But actually, it does teach you something, because you start realizing that it's not just about hard work. It's about hard work, long hours, but smart as well.
Yeah.
And you need everything. You need to be smart, you need to work hard and efficient and long hours. And that's the way that you make big success. So it taught me about the smart bit, because the things I did as a naive youngster were very stupid. But it was a part of the learning curve, And of course, if I'd have been going to a private school somewhere with wealthy people, they would have inspired me and I'd have learnt from them. But would I have learnt actually as intimately and intensely as I learnt through analysing my own mistakes? Probably not.
So you had no mentoring, you had all the drive, you had all the ambition, and I love the fact the ambition was to ultimately help others. When did you find it clicked from a business point of view? Because that entrepreneurial side of things and doing silly things to then clearly not doing silly things and having...
It was sort of bit by bit, it was definitely a evolution, not a revolution. And people say, well, how did you feel when you suddenly were so rich? And I said, well, I never really was, it was a real evolution that really did start in my childhood, actually as early as 4 or 5 years old, because I used to do jumble sales in my backyard of the terrace streets of Shelton. And then when I ran out of my old few toys that I'd got, because I'd sold them all for a penny here and a halfpenny there, I went round to the neighbours and saw if any of their children, if I could buy any of their toys, so I could sell those. So it really did start, even though I made no money, it started at a very early age. And so I spent 50 years sort of trying to be successful. And so that was a very evolutionary situation. It's not like one day, you've won the lottery and you're suddenly wealthy, and how do you handle that? It was just bit by bit by bit.
I love the way you've articulated that. I'm going to jump forward a little bit, actually, to the day after, so to speak, that you have sold phones for you for huge numbers. That motivation and aspiration to help others, did that change how you felt on that day? Because I've met people that have been really successful, and the day after they've sold the business, they feel hollow. They've lost their drive. That was their fuel. They don't know what to do with themselves now. Hasn't made them happy. I guarantee you didn't have that.
No, I didn't.
You were ready to start.
When I sold the business, I wanted to do a lot more charity, a lot more family, and a lot more daytime TV.
Right.
Well, I did a lot more family, I did a lot more charity, and I did no daytime TV, and I got inundated with businesses that I've still got some of them to this day.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, so I didn't really achieve my objectives. In fact, what I often say, and it is actually true, that because I was sort of aiming for retirement stroke semi-retirement, and it's the biggest failure in my life, because here I am, how many years later, 18 years later, and I'm nowhere near retired.
No.
Quite the reverse. I'm up to my neck in work.
But I can see you've got a proper sparkle in your eye. You're going to turn 71, I believe, in not too long in the future.
Yeah, 2 weeks' time.
And yet you look motivated, stimulated. What is that drive that's still keeping you going? Because I can feel it coming off you.
Well, I think generally, although I've had a lot of hard times in my life, it's the joy of life. But where does the joy of life come from? Well, it comes from success. That's one parcel. Success is gives you a real buzz and a feeling of pride. But more importantly for me, over the last 20 odd years probably, is the feeling of changing the world, or that's a bit grandiose, but trying to change as much of the world as I can. It's really a tiny bit in comparison to what really needs doing. And I've campaigned for the Ukraine. I've got a Ukraine family living with me. These are on the minor areas, but then helping children, it became a passion of mine. But I've helped all sorts, Elton John's AIDS Foundation and all sorts of different charities. And that is a real driving force of my life. In fact, this week It does sound ridiculous, and it might sound to the listeners as virtue signalling, but the simple fact is I've been working from 8 o'clock in the morning till 11, 12 o'clock at night, and everything has been about charity. Not one single business meeting. It's been charity dinners. I've got another one tonight. And I'm only doing this with you now because I'm able to talk about the charity. And I don't mind talking about myself, but really what I want to do is inspire people to be charitable and to pay the taxes. So you can imagine when I'm in Monaco, I'm a bit of a pariah, you know. But I do want people to pay the taxes, and I do want people to be charitable, because we have to improve society, and we cannot have this rich-poor divide where we've got billionaires worth 300 billion, and you know, and I don't discount myself in this, although I'm only worth a fraction of that, tiny fraction, but I'm still incredibly wealthy. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got like the kids that we help, where the parents are in a poverty trap, looking after a child 24 hours 7 that requires intense help, and they've got no money to buy the medical equipment or medical attention that their child needs and that they can't get from the health service. And that's a devastating gap. And it really ought to not exist. And just for clarity for those rich people watching, I'm all in favour of billionaires. We have to have motivation to be as successful as we possibly can. But I just wish, they're all going to hate me for this, but I just wish I was a global dictator. And what I would do is I'd say to every person on the planet that was rich, you will now pay a wealth tax of 1 or 2% of your wealth every year. They could still make a lot more money than that, so it wouldn't cost them anything. It's just
and it wouldn't impact their lifestyle or anything.
Well, it wouldn't impact anything. It wouldn't impact the wealth. You know, because if you're worth 300 billion, as in some of the people in the world now, you know, you take 2% off them, but they're making more than that 2% every year. They might be making 10, 15, 20% a year. It just wouldn't touch them. So you don't take away any incentive to be successful and employ a huge amount of people. You don't take any of that away. But if you took 1 to 2% of off all the people like me every annum, just imagine how that would transform the world beyond belief.
100%.
But I'm not in favour of it being done on a local basis, because you destroy your own country, because the wealthy people then go to Portugal, to Italy, to Spain, to all these tax havens all around the world. And you lose then the strength of Britain. So I just wish that I could be that dictator.
I wish you could be too. And actually, it's interesting because you mentioned the number 300 billion, right? You know, that's astronomical numbers. A lot of those people may well not be happy. I can feel from you that you seem really happy, and the whole money doesn't make you happy. So actually giving back and having a purpose, which is talked about a lot now in the kind of business, mental health side of things. I mean, you know, you're just clearly driven. There's a real purpose there. You've pledged 70% of your wealth to giving into charities. Someone worth 300 billion, 500 billion would probably be a lot happier if they were doing that. Do you agree?
Well, I absolutely do. I think of these super rich people. They could afford to join the Giving Pledge and give 99% of the wealth away through the Giving Pledge. They don't become poorer by 99% overnight, because you only have to do it either during or after your lifetime. They can still enjoy the same wealth, and it's not even a legal commitment. It's just a pledge. And if they did that, they'd be the heroes of the world, you know, and they'd still have more wealth than I've got, you know. And I think, why don't they do it? Why not?
Well, let's hope some of them are watching now, huh? Because I mean, it's evident you're.
Well, we
happy.
know the people are, don't we? Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and plenty more of them. And they just ought to join the Giving Pledge if they haven't already, and just pledge the money. It doesn't have to be 99%, of course, but even if it was, they're still worth billions.
And have everything they want, and then support those that don't. Sitting here now, what is your definition of success?
My definition of success is the definition that I've given to my children. I recognised, I mean, people told me this anyway, but I recognised it myself, which is that when you've got children for a very successful father, it can be a burden to them, because they think, well, maybe no matter what I do, it might not be good enough. And how do I replicate Dad's success? So I sort of compensated for that right in the early days. And I said, look, I don't expect anything of you. Only two things. And then, what's that, Dad? One, I really want you to be happy. Of course I do. I want you to be happy. Lovely. And the second thing is, whatever you do in life, I want you to leave the world a better place than you found it. Now, if in part and parcel the happiness, you need to be a billionaire, and that's the direction you go in, and that provides happiness, fine, that's great, do it. You know, go out and create the jobs and go out and create the wealth, but leave the world a better place than you found it. And that is, to me, what happiness is.
That's awesome.
Extraordinary Life Stories is proudly sponsored by the Georgia Emerson Centre. Introducing the Georgia Emerson Centre, where innovation meets health. If you are tired of waiting for a diagnosis or believe there should be other ways to treat your condition, the Georgia Emerson Centre could help you. We take a patient-first approach and offer the latest medications and technological advancements in private healthcare across a number of key areas, including but not limited to headaches, migraines and chronic pain, mental health conditions, addiction and ADHD diagnosis and treatment. We have an on-site lab for diagnostics to enable you to receive health assessments on your terms and in your timelines. From our state-of-the-art clinic in central London, our consultants want to help you improve your quality of life and access to affordable healthcare services. Take back control of your health at the Georgia Emerson Centre. Extraordinary Life Stories is proudly sponsored by the Georgia Emerson Centre.
I think one of the things I've learned, and it's coming across from you as well, is to be able to help others, to be able to help anyone, you've got to try and be the best version of yourself. It's clear you keep yourself physically fit and your mindset's just electric. What do you do? Because there's so many things, from ice baths to cold showers to breathing exercises. What works for you?
Well, I'm hugely big into vitamin regimes.
Okay.
Supplements. I'm even bigger into healthy eating. So most of your listeners to this would, if I told them what was unhealthy, they'd be shocked.
Right.
I go into the finest detail of what's truly healthy. And I will give you an example of that, because people will find it shocking. 5 a day.
Okay.
Fruit and vegetables. Wrong. Absolutely wrong.
Okay.
A lot of vegetables are not healthy and a lot of fruit's not healthy. Yes, in the fruit you get some vitamin C, but you also get a massive dose of sugar in the form of glucose and fructose. Glucose is managed by your blood glucose and by your pancreas that comes in as insulin and sucks that blood glucose out. But the liver has to cope with the fructose, and it causes fatty liver disease if you're eating fruit in big quantities. Now, I'm not saying you can't have an apple a day or a pear a day. Yeah. I'm talking fruit is not that healthy. And even worse, and this is what nearly everybody does, especially when they go to a hotel, a glass of orange juice. Absolutely dreadful. There's 20 teaspoonfuls of sugar in a big glass of orange juice. The same as in a glass of Coke. Well, why would you do it?
I didn't know
Why
that.
would you do it? You just don't do it.
No.
But it's not because they're negligent with their health. They just don't understand, and that's the trouble with nutrition. It's very, very, very complicated. So I do that. I exercise prolifically. I cycle a lot, do weights a lot, because you don't want to just be aerobically fit. You want to be, your muscles need to be strong and fit to support your body. So I do as much as I can, really, to make certain that I've got the longest, healthiest life.
Yeah, fair play to you. It shows. You've probably got a gym somewhere in this incredible home. Yeah. I've got to bring it up because it's a privilege being in here. Tell me about how this came to be. Was this always a long-term ambition to have such an incredible home in Mayfair, or did it just become something
it wasn't
that
at
evolved?
all. No, it wasn't at all. I've got a very small flat in Imperial Wharf, down towards Fulham, and I was getting more and more into charitable work, and especially when I sold the business.
Sure.
And I was doing not just giving money away, but also wanting to enthuse and influence people. And this little flat wasn't suitable for entertaining. So I wanted a nicer home, a better home that people would be wanting to come to. So I started looking for something. I did not think of anything like this.
Went to the extreme.
But I came across it. It was owned by the Sultan of Brunei. It was in dreadful, dreadful state, both from a maintenance point of view, but also from an interior design point of view. And I just fell in love with the idea of it because I've got the ballroom for entertaining. I just got so many entertaining spaces where I knew I could bring wealthy people and influence them.
Yeah. So that was the driver. The driver wasn't for the opulence for you to enjoy. It was actually to help facilitate your
It's hard to
fundraising.
put percentages on it because, of course, I enjoy the pride of owning it.
Sure.
But there's no way I could justify it if it wasn't for the charity work. I wouldn't have it. I wouldn't have it because actually it's a bit of a liability in some ways because I've got these 2 young children. I daren't bring them down here because everything's so delicate and so perfect.
Oh, the details are incredible.
Whereas my home in Staffordshire, it's all a bit rough and ready. You can knock a bit of the old furniture back because it's 500 years old. You put another bit of damage on it, it's just a bit of patina. That you don't want to damage it deliberately, of course, but you don't have to worry. Here, I have to worry. You will have noticed today when the staff brought you in that they were guiding you towards being respectful of the carpets.
So if I came to see you in Stafford, that would be different.
I'm sorry?
If you came to see you in Staffordshire, that would be different.
Absolutely different.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
come
cool.
in and
Yeah.
knock the place about a bit. You know,
I like that.
I'm joking, but no concern. So now the beauty of this home is I've got 50 people coming tonight for a charity event.
Yeah.
We'll be down in the entertainment area, down in the basements there, and people love coming here. And then I'm able to wine and dine them, entertain them, and influence them. And some of those people tonight will end up being generous supporters of my charitable aims.
Yeah, and you're in a beautiful surrounding to be able to do that. Everyone enjoys coming, and you're able to facilitate what means a lot to
And
you.
you know the beauty of that as well for me is that, I mean, I've got lots of friends, but what I really like is that the new friends that come in are all through charity. And first of all, they tick that kindness box, that they're kind and charitable. I'm not saying they're perfect, and I'm certainly not saying I'm perfect.
Sure.
I'm a long way off that, but they're kind. They tick that charitable box. And that for me is one of the greatest tick boxes. Then you want somebody that's fun and, and maybe similar interests.
Yeah.
So you want the other things as well. But if you start off with the charity box ticked, that's actually a nice start point.
Yeah. I can't not bring up your incredible shirt and the relevance of the butterflies.
Yeah.
But you tell me, to you, the relevance and importance of butterflies.
Yeah, well, going back now 18, 19 years with Caudwell children, we helped a little girl named Tilly, 3 years old, muscular atrophy. And for those people that don't know, muscular atrophy just attacks every muscle in the body and your muscles become like jelly. There's no strength at all, so you can't sit up, you can't walk, you can't really do anything. You've got the weakest movement of any limbs that you could ever imagine. And what they desperately need is a powered wheelchair with a joystick control and power-assisted arm movements and everything to make their life tolerable. And we helped this little girl with this powered wheelchair, and it transformed her life, not just physically, but emotionally, because suddenly she was able not to compete with her peers, but to be somewhere near able to relate to them on a proper level. And it transformed her physically and mentally. And a couple of years later, she really wanted to help Caudwell children. And what she did was did this collage. And it was a butterfly collage. And at the bottom, there was all these little weak butterflies with weak wings and very poor colours and, sort of very, very poor looking set of butterflies. And then there was a line. And above the line was all these beautiful butterflies with huge colourful wings flying off. And the line she put on, she called Caudwell Children. And she gave me that collage to sell on our gala dinner. Now, it was a simplistic thing. It was beautiful spiritually because it was sort of meant a lot to me. And I auctioned it off on the night, and something that, if it hadn't been for the cause and the message behind it, would have not just been worth a few pounds or whatever or nothing, you know.
Sure, yeah.
And I raised £875,000 for that on that night.
Awesome.
And after that, we changed the gala dinner to the butterfly ball. And so the butterfly emblem has been quite close. And a friend bought me this because
That's awesome.
butterflies.
It suits you.
And it represents Tilly. It represents what we do, and it represents that trying to turn somebody that's very, very oppressed by their birth of having these problems and illnesses and defects into something beautiful.
Yeah, no, you've articulated that brilliantly. I'm going to change the subject to something that potentially could wind us up a little bit in terms of recent events with Rishi Sunak going backwards on green energy. It's affecting me in a number of my businesses and investments. I've heard just through some of the stuff I follow with you on social media, some of your opinions, so I'm not trying to wind you up or open a can of worms. But you mentioned, I know, but just in context of how much you've mentioned how much you love the country and the fact that, you know, we both know that so much of that enterprise comes from entrepreneurs. I know a number of people that have pledged and committed businesses to make a difference in carbon neutral and zero carbon. And they're just like, really, where's the consistency? You've also mentioned that global dictatorships on these. It feels like you could just influence something so much better than what's actually going on at the moment, which is that lack of consistency. You know, say something and then don't follow it up. And yet we're all being advised to drive electric cars, you know, can of worms. But how can this be better? How can we make this a better situation than it is now?
It is a can of worms.
Yeah.
When the pandemic came on, I said to the government, I campaigned with them, and I said to the government, directly to Boris and directly to Rishi, we absolutely have to create a tax-free enterprise zone to bring environmental technology businesses into the UK from all over the world. We have to do that now to create jobs in the future and to compensate for all the cost of the pandemic and to make Britain great again.
It's a great
but
idea.
by the way, at the same time, we'll be leading the world then on environmental technologies, exporting all that product out and setting an example. I was delighted that Boris made 2030 because we're 5 years ahead of Europe and showing the world, like we did in the Industrial Revolution, which of course caused all this problem, but that's another story. We showed the world where to go, and we need to show the world where to go now.
Yeah.
So that's one point, and they've never done anything. And if they'd done it, instead of now them being in the doldrums where nobody wants to vote Conservative, well, not nobody, that's of course wrong, but where they've lost a lot of support, they'd now be able to say, yeah, look, the pandemic hurt us, Brexit might have hurt us a bit, and the Ukraine war's now hurting us a bit as well. But look what we've got. We've got all these companies lined up. Some are already in Britain, more are coming. It's all to do with the environment. It's going to transform the environment over a period of time, and it's going to transform Britain's GDP because we'll be exporting all this product. We'll be creating jobs. It'll all be a virtuous circle. And they've done nothing. No. So what are they selling to the nation now? Oh, well, you're worried about 2030, so we'll make it 2035. It's a nonsense because whatever objection anybody can raise to 2030, there's a counter-argument. Some people put on my social media, I can't afford to change my boiler in 2030. No. Well, they haven't got to.
No.
You know, they can keep the boiler for as long as it works. Yeah. When their gas or oil boiler fails in many years to come, that's the only time they'd have to change it, but they'd have to change it anyway. Yeah. Now, at the moment, the government have announced a subsidy scheme for changing your boiler. So it's a positive, because when the boiler breaks down, they haven't got to go out and buy another gas boiler, another fossil fuel boiler, and pay the whole money. They can go out and have an electric boiler that's subsidised by the government.
Yeah.
And this is what Rishi should have been saying. He should have been saying it all positive. Yeah. We will support you. And by the way, because we're driving environmental and renewable energies, instead of electricity being 60 pence a kilowatt, which is probably what it is now if you take the government subsidies out, we can generate it in a renewable manner that won't damage the environment at all, and we can get it down to 10 pence a kilowatt. And so you'll win by a boiler that's replaced at our cost partially or mostly, and you'll win out of cheaper electricity, and you won't have to worry about whether we buy stuff from Russia.
Yeah.
Where's the loss in that politically? I'm completely bamboozled. Now, each argument that the government or people have got, and Rishi has won 5% votes out of this, he has won, but he's won because he hasn't put the record right. People have said to me, well, I can't afford an electric car. But the people that in 2030 that can't afford an electric car probably couldn't afford a new internal combustion engine, possibly.
Sure.
But in any event, they can buy a new internal combustion engine if they want to in 2029. That'll last them 10 years. But also, of course, the price of electric cars are going to come down. Battery technology is the biggest problem. It's very expensive and it's going to reduce dramatically over the next 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
But we need to force that issue.
Yes.
It's the old adage, necessity is the mother of invention. And 2030 was forcing the motor manufacturers, forcing everybody to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And then if there were any losers in society, government can afford to compensate them in a way, but there wouldn't be losers. There'd only be winners if we attract all those environmental businesses from around the world. And it drives me nuts because it's so negative. 2035, and then you did mention consistency, and of course, how do businesses trust the government?
Trust is the word, right?
Chopping and changing. When you're told it's 2030 as a motor manufacturer or anything else, that's what you've got to do. That's what you've got to stick for.
Yeah.
You go flat out to achieve it, knowing that that's the rule.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, because I might win 5% more votes in the short term, oh, we'll make it 2035. Why didn't he sell the message? Why didn't they bring in a tax-free enterprise zone for these companies coming into the UK? And I wasn't saying tax-free forever either. It's tax-free maybe for 10 years.
No, but it's a good enough incentive.
And then maybe after that, a differential rate of tax.
Yeah.
So they've got a corporation tax that's half the national average because we really need them here. We want them here. They're saving the planet, and it's the most desirable business on the planet. Anybody that's involved in the environment. And they'd have to be approved by a group of government people that it's really, they've got the wherewithal, they've got the scalability, they've got the technology, they've got the ideas to make Britain successul.
Yeah.
Where is that so complicated?
Well, I've wound you up, and I didn't mean to do that.
Up,
I'm sorry.
And I could talk like this for hours.
I know, and it's all really good sense, and it's you hear it and you think, why is it not being done? And then that's going to wind me up as well. Very much back to you. You've achieved so much. There's so much you've done, and you've still got that glint in your eye of things you're already doing. What have you not done yet that is still on that sort of bucket list that you want to do?
Nothing from a point of view of business, although I've got lots of businesses on the go, and I'm very passionate about them, but they're not something I feel is an ambition or a goal. I've got the ambition within the business.
Yep.
The property that I've got over there, number 1 Mayfair, I want it to be the most desirable, prestigious set of apartments in the world. That's my goal, that's my ambition. But whether it makes me a ton of money is secondary, really. I mean, it'd be nice because more money will go to charity, but it's not the big driver. The big driver is quality and pride on that.
Yeah.
But if you then move away from business, I'd love to live long enough to be able to influence my children on the path to happiness and leaving the world a better place. And of course, I've got 2 very young children, so there's big risk there to me from that point of view. And I'd love to be there long enough to not give them money, but support them.
Yep.
Give them soft loans or whatever they need to set them on the path to whatever their ambitions and their happiness is in terms of success. That's what I'd love to do.
Yeah.
And then alongside that, there is the charity piece. I set a new charity up called Caudwell Youth, we're helping all young people from age 11 to 24 who are at risk. And they're often care experienced, and they're at risk because they're vulnerable to criminality, repeat criminality, drug abuse, mental health problems. They're at risk.
Oh, got it.
And it's only just been founded a year ago. We had a meeting here this morning about it actually, and we're now helping 150 young people in a small location just north of the M25. But we think there's about 100,000 young people every year that we ought to be helping. The scalability of that is enormous. To go from 150, which is taking us a year to get to, next year it'll be 300, but to get to that, from that to 100,000. And I desperately hope that within my own lifetime, we're nationwide and helping all of that 100,000. That, to me, I think then I could die a happy guy.
Yeah, awesome. I love what you're doing. I love how you've articulated it to me. And you're a busy, busy man, and you've made time to talk to me today. So thank you, John. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Extraordinary Life Stories is proudly sponsored by the Georgia Emerson Centre. Introducing the Georgia Emerson Centre, where innovation meets health. If you are tired of waiting for a diagnosis or believe there should be other ways to treat your condition, the Georgia Emerson Centre could help you. We take a patient-first approach and offer the latest medications and technological advancements in private healthcare across a number of key areas, including but not limited to headaches, migraines and chronic pain, mental health conditions, addiction and ADHD diagnosis and treatment. We have an on-site lab for diagnostics to enable you to receive health assessments on your terms and in your timelines. From our state-of-the-art clinic in central London, our consultants want to help you improve your quality of life and access to affordable healthcare services. Take back control of your health at the Georgia Emerson Centre.